Second, Michael Graves, aka Big Mike.
Namaste.
And as you guys know, this is a live show, and in approximately 25 minutes or so, you guys will have an opportunity to call in and discuss some of the topics we discussed, as well as introduce some of your own topics, and we will comment on those as well. As customary, and you guys know, we have our super in-house historian who always has some information to enlighten us with concerning history, black history. Mike?
Just moonlighting history, truth be told. But in the event, want to remind those, and certainly if you've been around a while, you should remember Willie Turks, 6/28, 1982. That was the black man, MTA worker, with two other colleagues who was pulled out of his car by a mob of whites, well over 20-something whites. The only name that people was mentioning at that time was Gino Bova, but it was well over 20-some-odd whites. And they beat the stuffing out of his two colleagues and actually killed him. They beat him to death, fractured his cranium, his head, and he was killed. So we should not, and that caused a great movement over the city. So we should not forget during the Koch administration, white mobs going crazy in the streets, killing black folks, and certainly in the same time, Carlos Cooks, a great Pan-Africanist in the tradition of Marcus Garvey, admired and respected Marcus Garvey's work, did so much in continuing that work. So we should always remember Carlos Cooks, a great humanitarian, a great brother, strong on black history and black culture. Great man, one of the leading Pan-Africanists of his day, Carlos Cooks, and especially those who remember Alambe Brath. You can't think of Alambe Brath without thinking of also Carlos Cooks. So let's always keep them in mind. And the third thing, last but not least, is Juneteenth, which occurred 6/19/1865. Certainly none of us was around at that time. But as it were, Texas was one of the last states, one of the largest states in the nation, actually. But it didn't get the message, as they tell the story, to June the 2nd, that, something that transpired already in April, had already occurred, freedom of black men and women and children were supposed to be enacted at that time at the end of the Civil War. Texas continued that practice of enslaving blacks and would not remove blacks from bondage. Consequently, on Juneteenth, it took a fight, and so a general led well over 2,000 soldiers, primarily black soldiers from the 9th, 10th, 24th, 25th Cavalry, 2,000 strong, and of course the white generals who fled out of Mississippi and other places, who said they would continue slavery at all costs, and that they was not going to free anyone. When they saw that dust from a distance, and they saw those 2,000 black men, strong, determined, coming straight at them, they ran like they ran out of Mississippi. They ran and gave up all the boasting, all that stuff about they're not going to acquiesce, that the war was over, they're not going to free anybody, and that nobody from Washington, D.C. is in a position to dictate to them what to do. But when they saw those, what you call the Buffalo Soldiers? When they saw them Buffalo Soldiers bearing down on them, they ran like they ran in Mississippi and Tennessee and all the places. They ran and just ran out of Texas. And that's why some of them ended up in places like Arizona. That's why Arizona is really a Confederate state to this very day, because they all left, and McCain's family was among them, from Mississippi, but ended up in Arizona. So long live not only the Buffalo Soldier, but 9th, 10th, 24th, 25th Cavalry, strong, determined black men that went there not only after getting their freedom and freeing the rest of the country, but hearing that there were still black men, women, and children in Texas that wasn't free, they went there and freed them too. So big ups to our people.
All right. Okay, thank you, Michael, for that piece.
Exactly.
We greatly appreciate it.
Right.
You know, the knowledge is needed to be disseminated amongst our family.
Well, I had to mention Juneteenth because they mentioned Juneteenth saying that we got the word.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, enslaved Africans didn't know they was free. White folks didn't know that this had already transpired, so nobody knew nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And they just magically on the 19th said, you know what, y'all guys can go.
Mm.
And they don't tell the real story about those bad, bold black soldiers that was going to tear their damn heads off. They don't want to talk about that. So that's why you're going to hear it on Community College. That's the real Juneteenth.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That other Africans went to free other Africans, and in that event, those white cowards ran like the cowards that they are.
And very frequently, and I didn't want to touch on it because Michael did such an extraordinary job explaining the history of the Juneteenth celebration, which many continue to celebrate until today. But on this program, we talk many times on a historical piece, especially when we talk about riots of whites, when they killed blacks, when they raided towns, when the sheriff and the deputies, along with the citizens, invade black communities and throw them out. But here we have instances, it's not the only one, but here's a historic incident when everybody had guns.
Right.
Everybody
Even
had
Stephen.
Everybody had the opportunity to man up. It was
Right.
even Stephen. So it's not as if, you're a white mob with guns and shotguns and you're pouncing on unarmed men, women, and children, and you feel, bold and encouraged because you have other hooligans with you. On this particular, they knew they was coming. Like you said, they seen the
Right.
dust.
Right.
They had time to arm themselves to say, okay, let's man up and, whoever wins, wins. So it's a very historic event that our community should be well aware of.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, thanks again, Mike. We're going to go to our first topic, and this has been discussed very, very frequently in the last few, I guess, weeks or months. They have the movie now that's called When They See Us, based on the Central Park jogger case. I've had numerous people call me and said that they were watching the movie and just touched their spirit so hard. I'm talking about members from the New York City Police Department who understand the racism that exists inside of the police department, how the police officers and the detectives utilize these illegal tactics to convince and to trick members of our community into confessing, whether they are innocent or not. I mean, that's not the issue. The issue is that sometimes they just want to make an arrest, and they have no sense of humanity when they deal with our children and members of our community. But Michael, I know that you wanted to touch on the Central Park case.
I really wanted to. Now, last week I didn't want to, and pardon me if in any way with the caller I sounded a little aggressive with the caller because the caller said how impactful the movie was, and I was dealing from my mind with evidence and facts, but the person was expressing how they felt about the movie. So pardon if any way I sounded a little aggressive or intolerant with respect to listening and just hearing, your vantage point. But what I wanted to say was that there has been a conscious effort by white folks going back to whether it's 1619 in this country or prior to that on the continent of Africa or in the Caribbean to enslave our minds. That's why they give us things. That's why little children go with the hook in these rap records. If they don't remember nothing else, they know the hook. So we have been have it imposed on us, this Central Park 5. How is it 5? Now, let me just explain this real quick, and hopefully we won't have to because you have radio personalities, TV personalities, leaders, all using that term. It's a term of enslavement. To use that term, Ken Burns used it in a very popular documentary. He's one of the top documentarians in the world. I won't fight that. His stuff is excellent for the most part. That's why I know with this one, there was intentionality and purpose in him calling it the Central Park 5. As I've always maintained on this program through the years, I've said Central Park 7. Let me give you the exact names. First of all, because we can all agree with math. We can't disagree with math. Let me give you the names first, and then we'll take it from there with the story. Very quickly. Kevin Richardson, 1. 2, Raymond Santana. 3, Antron McCray. 4, Yusef Salaam. 5, Corey Wise. 6, Steve Lopez. 7, Michael Briscoe. 8, Jermaine Robinson. And the ninth one, if you want that, is Clarence Thomas. Not the one who loves white women and hate black people, but it was a youth. I know the names are similar. Now, the reason why I say Central Park 7 is because they got rid of they dropped the charges on Clarence Thomas, and they also dropped the charges on Robinson on Jermaine Robinson. So we was left with 7. Steve Lopez, the Latino young man, he was 13 or 14 years old. They convinced his parents to cop a plea and that he'll do less time. And then you had Michael Briscoe, who had the brilliant attorney extraordinaire, Alton Maddox as attorney. He was able to beat the charges. Alton Maddox was trying to get the other young men in his camp because he understood they didn't have a case. He understood this was all manufactured stuff. He knew it then in '89, what people are realizing and experiencing when you watch this movie now. You go through all these emotions of passion and you feel that way. Well, damn it, Alton Maddox felt that way in '89. He understood clearly that the police were lying. The district attorney's office was lying. Stop perpetuating this Central Park 5 thing. It was 7. So Alton's client's gone. Steve Lopez takes a plea, and those 5 young men stayed in jail between 6 and 13 years, somewhere thereabouts, based on their age and other things. And so what we have is a situation where now in 2002, Mateus Reyes comes forward and said he's the one able to prove it to police investigators beyond a shadow of a doubt. He was able to describe things that was not in any newspaper. It was not in any publications at all. He was able to tell you where he accosted her, how he did it, where he dragged her, how he beat her down, the whole 9 yards, and what she had on, to the letter. And yet you still have, whether it's President Trump, whether it's Fairstein, still saying to this day that that it's a lie. And then they even had a hoax just in case something happened. They had a missing 6th person. Just in case they would have to use their ace in the hole, they made room for there was one other person. Why? Because the science was not in their favor. The DNA did not reflect what they wanted. The white man uses science when it's to his advantage. When it does not go along with his agenda, he dismisses it outright. And then the newspapers, the magazines, over the airwaves, TV, radio, they all dismiss it also. So wanted to make that crystal clear that when you say Central Park 5, when you watch that documentary, when you watch this movie that's out now, they're not going to tell you that Alton Maddox got his client off. They're not going to tell you how science was just suspended in real time. See, it's easy to look back at something that happened 30 years ago now. But in real time, there are those who understood the machinations of the NYPD, of the district attorney's office, and to this day, Cyrus Vance was just asked because of the legal aid and public defenders. They asked for a review of the case. He said he's not going to act on that, and he made it crystal clear. He said that Ledbetter is a lawyer in good standing with his office. What is he saying by that? He has the most powerful district attorney's office in the country, the Manhattan DA's office, and they're saying white supremacy rules. We don't care less how many lives we ruined and how many lives was told. She is in good standing with that office. And at that point, I'll stop. I'm sorry that I took so long, but I had to get that off. I've been holding it since '89, damn it. So I just needed that minute to make it clear when they say Central Park 5 on the radio, it's with intent. when white people do it and when black people do it, they have enslaved African minds. Consequently, they are nothing but 20th century slaves because they know better.
Noah?
Well, I think Mike said it all. It's surprising to me with the record that Cyrus Vance have in Manhattan as a district attorney that he continuously gets supported by black elected officials in Manhattan, by the black electorate in Manhattan. I mean, Cyrus Vance, when you look at him throwing out the rape charge against DSK, who raped a black woman in the hotel. I mean, he has a track record. His particular office has a disproportionate prosecution of African Americans for trivial crimes, in this particular borough for small nonviolent misdemeanor. When you look at the incarceration rates of Rikers Island, you have a very large a percentage of them coming from Manhattan, even though boroughs like Brooklyn have a larger black population. So Cyrus Vance has proven that he's an enemy of the black community, yet he continuously gets elected by the black votes in that particular borough. And as it relates to the Central Park case, there's individuals, as you stated, President Trump, who has not denounced his previous. He refused to say I made a mistake. He just piles on to his ignorance, and there's many others that you mentioned. But Michael covered it all very passionately, and Automatics ought to get credit because, as Michael stated, he wanted to represent all of the kids because at that particular time, at that date, he knew that they were being bombarded, they were being railroaded, and he's seen it as he always has, way before many other individuals seen it. But they intentionally excluded him from his representation of the rest of the individuals. Subsequently, they did get railroaded.
And one thing you just gave me that I almost forgot to mention, I'm glad you mentioned that. They said, we'll give up one. In other words, we'll let Briscoe go, Michael Briscoe go, because of his attempt. And glad you mentioned that, Noel. He was trying to get all the other 6. So they said, wow, we got to move fast. Let Briscoe go. Because Automatic said, damn it, put 12 in the box right now.
Right.
And all the papers called him crazy. They just said he was a lunatic lawyer that didn't know his profession. Alton said, put him in the box right now, I demand it. Guess what they said? We prepared to go to court. Guess what they did? They said, you know what? Let his client go because he's right. We don't have a case right now. Let it go, and guess what? We're going to bag the rest of them. And that's what they did. So Automatics was brilliant in that he was pushing to get to the stars, but he got the moon because he got his client off, but he was trying to get those other ones, and they understood they didn't have a case. They had to make up a case over the next year. So guess what they did? They let Automatic's client go, and they made a case and manufactured evidence that didn't exist to put the other 6 away in jail.
One of the problems I have now, we talked about a few things relative to this particular case and Cyrus Vance and elections. One of the problems I have with our community and these elected officials is that they vote based on power or perceived power, who they believe has the opportunity to win and who has the power within this borough. So that's one of the problems we have. And when we talk about the Central Park case, that was a horrific case, but there are multitudes of horrific cases that exist within this injustice system where our children are being falsely arrested, falsely prosecuted, and spend time in jail. A lot of them don't have an Automatics. A lot of them don't have the support that came about this particular case based on some of the evidence that was presented and some of the people that found passion in attacking this system that is constantly attacking and failing our community. So, we have to open our eyes on a broader spectrum and realize that there is an injustice system that is attacking and a political system that attacks our community continuously. And we have a multitude of our youth that are subjected to this. But no, okay.
And when you talk about the, now this is branching off the conversation, when you talk about the genius of Automatics, a lot of people don't know, according to the Constitution, all defendants have a right to a speedy trial. When you've been accused and arrested by the prosecutor, you have a right to say, listen, we better go to trial. And a lot of times the prosecutor's office is not prepared because they have faulty evidence. Sometimes they have no evidence.
Right.
So they want you to languish in Rikers Island hoping that they can come 6 months from now and 7 months from now, they can come to you and say, listen, if you plead guilty to whatever, you'll get time served and we'll let you go. Automatics doesn't fall for that. Many attorneys do. A lot of people, when they get arrested, they don't even know. We do private investigations now. They don't even know that a lot of times they sign off on their right to a speedy trial. That's why they stay in Rikers Island sometimes for 2 years, 2.5 years, because they signed off on it and they drew off their rights to a speedy trial. Automatics never fell for that. He very frequently pressed the district attorney, you want to charge my client? You want to offer him no bail? We ready to go to trial now. And he forced them to go to trial as soon as possible. And that's something that a whole lot of attorneys don't do. And we talked about before on this program how attorneys don't do the, when they first go to civil cases, the deliberations, where they get the opportunity to investigate or cross-examine these police officers when the district attorney refused to prosecute. So there's so much credit that Automatics, should get, and that's why he was designated enemy number one as it relates to attorneys in New York, because he was very effective, he was very progressive, and he was very strategic and intelligent. And he was a race man.
Right, that's right.
He was nationalistic.
That's right.
So Automatics, much love to you.
Right. And if we can develop some more of that consciousness in some of the black attorneys that are present now, maybe we will have a better opportunity or a better chance to ensure that there is, for lack of a better term, some fairness and equity in this injustice system that exists that solely has its foot or constantly has its foot on the neck of African people. All right. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Noel. We're going to go to another topic. I'm going to go to this one. In Flint, Michigan, that case. Now, I don't know, Will, you have some information on that as far as it being thrown out?
Right. Yeah, real quick, this is a story that we covered on Community Cop in 2014. Many of you may know in Flint, Michigan, the governor and the city managers had changed the water system of Flint. Unbeknownst to the population, the system that they utilized, it was eroded and it corrodes the water, and it caused a lot of problems with the amount of lead that was in the pipes that people in Flint, Michigan was drinking for a long period of time. Many people complained. They smelled the water. It smelled different. It tastes different. But the elected officials ignored it. And for years, this lead was going into people's body, and especially as it relates to children. In 2017, Attorney General Bill Schuett, charged 5 defendants, 5 government administrations with a variety of charges, one of them including voluntary manslaughter because of the death of over 12 individuals as a result of this lead that they knew was in the water, but they did nothing about. Well, recently, the new Attorney General, Dana Nessel, who took office this year, he removed these charges to the chagrin of a lot of people in Flint, Michigan. They're very angry and upset. He claims that his objective is that he didn't like the way the former prosecutor had prepared the case, and his goal is to file a stronger case. Some of the arguments that they brought up wasn't tweaked correctly, and he didn't think they were going to be successful. Time will tell whether or not he's really serious about prosecuting these individuals who knew that the water in Flint, Michigan was tainted, but did nothing about it, will result in high lead levels in young children's blood that's going to stunt their growth and development. So we're going to see, and we'll keep our eye on this particular prosecutor to see if this is just allowed them to scapegoat, to get away with what they did, or whether or not he is really going to retry this case, reconstruct the particular case so it could be a stronger case. And so he, as he claims, he makes certain that these individuals actually get convicted.
Just 4 words: white supremacist, environmental racism.
Wow. When we look at the ills that exist when it comes to governments and how they deal with issues that are affecting black and brown communities, I think you can use racism, if not 100% of the time, 99.9% of the time.
And I like white supremacy better.
Right. Okay. White supremacy. It's just, and really that is what it is.
Yeah.
But we really have to have a response to this white supremacy. You know, I believe it needs to be discussed. I believe that we have to talk about it. I believe that we have to take the covers off of it because white supremacists want to keep a cloak over it. But we have to recognize it and address it, and then we have to have a real response. Next topic. Michael, the family that was at the center of that viral arrest in Phoenix where the young girl was alleged, well, the young lady walked out, and we're talking about a child.
Yeah, 4 years old.
4-year-old child walking out of a store with a doll that had not been paid for. And the way the police responded as if they were after enemy number one when they approached his family. Mike?
Well, very quickly, 2 adults involved, okay? Drayvon Ames, the black man, and the black
22.
woman was Aisha Harper. Those were the adults. Then you had a couple of children involved, and certainly the one that was noted by Julian, the little girl who walked out. Then you have to consider there was a child, a little girl in her mother's hands, you know,
pregnant, and she was pregnant.
Yeah, she was pregnant at the time, and so you have a situation where the police officers, 4 of them, came out in a situation where you would think you was in Afghanistan, guns blazing, aimed on them, saying, "Get out of the effing car! Get out of the effing car! Get out of the effing car! I'll effing shoot you!" To a family, got all their guns trained on them, and then the mayor has the temerity to apologize as if, you know, hey, sorry, buddy. You know, the mayor, she apologized. She says, I'm deeply sorry. This is not who we are, and I refuse to allow this behavior to go unchallenged. I've spoken to the police chief, city manager, and the public safety chairperson. Really, that's what you're supposed to do as a mayor? Why didn't you first have those officers fired on the spot? All of them, not some of them, all of them. Why didn't you second call the district attorney and demand that they be arrested? Why didn't you do that? You just think that black people are like little children. And you could just say, hey, sorry, I'm deeply saddened by that. This is not who we are. Really? That's what the mayor did. And then she said that she's going to have the police chief, and you need to know the police chief's name. Her name is Jerry Williams, black woman. And she also apologized on behalf of the police department also. No, we don't. You're not a chief to apologize for the officers. Discipline them the same way they would do to you. Of course, if you did that to a white person and they had your job, you'd be history. So anyway, just want to say that to the family, that they're not getting any justice. Please, beloved, don't be fooled by a mayor apologizing. That's not what a mayor's job is to do, to apologize. The only ones that can apologize for that are the officers themselves. You can't apologize for the actions of another person. You deal with those actions. And that's about it, basically, what I would say. And, I'll end it there.
Well, to a great extent, this is a trend that happens with white politicians and white government officials, and they perhaps got it from Bill Clinton. You remember Bill Clinton was the one who apologized, after the fact for destroying the economy of Haiti. Bill Clinton was the one who apologized for ignoring the 1 million people being murdered, and it was in Darfur, in Africa. Well, we'll get to town. It was Bill Clinton who years afterwards apologized for.
Oh, you're talking about the Hutus and Tutsis?
Yeah, the Hutus and Tutsis.
Okay, yeah.
It was Bill, over 1 million slaughtered. He did absolutely nothing. He simply apologized.
That's Rwanda.
Rwanda, right. There you go. It was Bill Clinton who apologized, after the fact for his crime bill, which incarcerated over 1 million blacks.
Go ahead, bro.
Not
Go ahead.
Involved in any violent crimes, et cetera, et cetera. He simply just said, I apologize, it was a mistake. So this is a trend that white folks, after decimating, after destroying, after maleffecting black economy, black lives, they simply apologize as if we're supposed to accept it. So maybe she's taking a pattern after Bill Clinton.
That's a good point.
But as it relates to these police particular officers, when you look at the level of aggression, the level of anger, the level of disrespect that was posed towards this particular family, and then you compare it with the crime that they were accused of.
Crime.
accused of.
A doll.
Saying a 4-year-old took a doll, shoplifting at worst, from a particular store.
A 99-cent store.
Right. There's no compatibility to the level of aggression that was manifested by these particular officers. So what am I to assume? That race has something to do with it? They would deal with a pregnant white woman and a little 4-year-old white girl so aggressively. And when we look at all of these African Americans being murdered around the country, this is why. This is the level of aggression, hostility, anger that these police officers bring to the table when they approach black people, whether or not it's just simply a car stop, a traffic infraction, a light broken, tail light. You have this level of aggression. And this is a classic example. That's why Michael is so passionate saying that apology is not enough. This level of disrespect, aggression, and anger has to be checked, have to be dealt with.
The sad part, hold on, Michael, but the sad part about it is, you know how they have that saying, all roads lead to Rome?
Right.
All this leads back to white supremacy.
Exactly.
There is a disdain that these people have for African people. They didn't see a mother with a child.
Right.
They didn't see a family. They didn't see a 4-year-old girl. They saw black, and that permeated their white supremacy to kick in. Now, one of the statements that one of the officers made to the mother was that I could have shot you in front of your effing children, in front of your effing kids. Now, who says that? Who talks like that?
A white supremacist.
Exactly. Who has a hate and a disdain. And you said something very interesting. You attached that to a response by Bill Clinton. There are a multitude of issues that have occurred against African people in this nation and globally that you can attach that to.
Right.
So there is a nexus, a connection of white supremacy and how they deal with African people. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, how do you, as insane, as crazed as you sound, how can you demand that a black woman let a baby go? You're telling her, put your hands up. You heard her say to you several times, you hear in the background saying, I can't put my hands up, I got a baby. And he said, put that effing baby on the ground. Put the baby on the ground. The baby can't walk. What's the baby going to run away? It's a baby, a toddler. And he's demanding that she put it on the ground. And she's saying, I can't. I'm pregnant. She's letting them know because she's pleading for her life now. She understands that. She's pleading for her life, telling the police officer she's pregnant, and at the same time she's saying, I'm not putting the baby on the ground. I can't put my hands up in the air. She's begging for her life. She should not have to beg for her life over a damn doll.
She's begging for her life, her child's life, her unborn child's life. When we talk about the response, as Noel stated, that was so aggressive, we're talking about an entire family that was subjected to the possibility of being shot, harmed, or even killed. So we have to look at this from a humanitarian aspect because they're not going to.
And when you psychoanalyze the police officers, you have to go back. What were they there for? What was the accusation? Were they after an armed man? Were they after somebody who just shot somebody, or was they after someone who was accused of doing a violent crime? No. This was a child that was accused of taking something out of a particular store. That is why these police officers should be held accountable, because their level of aggression, as in many of these police shootings, the level of aggression is not equal to the accusation that they were alleged to be investigating. They go from 0 to 100 when it's African Americans, and race has to be acknowledged as being the core, the fundamental reason why these police officers act as if they do. They are Klansmen in blue uniform. This is a national issue, and I said on this program, and I say on my Facebook page many times, that selected officials, so-called black civil rights leaders in the black community throughout the nation, we have to address this criminality that exists in law enforcement, where they are murdering African-American men, women, and children on video and getting away with it.
And I know we have calls, and I'm going to go through the calls very quickly. But one of the things that I have a major problem with is that the police department is in the business, and all these police departments are in the business of protecting these police officers and their departments. Now they come out with a video. First of all, the store didn't press charges. Then they come out with a video saying that the father may have been shoplifting. Whether that's true or not, the response by the police was not appropriate for the allegations that were made and by whoever made the phone call. Someone shoplifting?
Right.
Is that how we respond to shoplifters now? But I'm sorry, callers. We got a little beyond our time.
Because there's so many horrific police shootings that we want to talk about.
Exactly. And we have some other things we want to talk about as well. But first caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment.
Okay, how you doing, Community Cop? Brother Ray
First
Ray,
caller.
listen, let me do this quick. The A-Team is back. You should
All
have
right, so
saw
we're
the smile
not
on Michael's face.
We're not hearing anything
You
yet.
should
I don't know
have
if
saw
there's an issue with our
Can you hear me?
phone lines. I'm sure our producers will rectify that if that is the problem. But we are ready to accept calls, so callers, hold on. I'm going to go to another. Anybody have any further comments on that particular case?
Matt, the phones are not working.
Yeah, they're working on it.
Okay. All right. There was a fatal shooting in California of an unarmed father in a car.
Right. This is one of the latest shootings that have hit YouTube and the social media, where a young brother named Ryan Twyman, who's a father of three, was sitting in his vehicle unarmed. He was shot over 30 times by a couple of police officers. And, you know, of course, the response by the selected officials in California is that there's going to be investigations, that a whole lot of people claim that they're outraged. Okay. Real quick, but this is, you know, we cannot expect anything better. I mean, those you don't remember in Cleveland, where cops shot at a black unarmed male and female in the car over 137 times, and Michael Brillo, who's an officer who was acquitted, he fired 49 times, jumped on the hood of the vehicle and emptied his round. And these everyone was acquitted in that particular case. 137 times police officers fired into a vehicle with a black man and black woman. Both of them were unarmed. And then, of course, officer who shot Philando Castillo was found not guilty on all counts. This is the brother who told the officer that he had a weapon, and that officer emptied his weapon into his lifeless body. So these horrific police shootings that are captured on video that we hear about, all these officers are being vindicated. So we'll see if Ryan Twyman receives any justice. As I stated, he was in his vehicle, unarmed, over 30 rounds fired into his body. Investigation is occurring.
You know, like I always say, there has to be a rethinking on our responses to these horrific shootings, because they're not changing their responses.
Right.
You know, like you said, there's always a vindication. These people are always being not maybe prosecuted, but never sentenced, never
convicted
right. of these particular
and
crimes.
Real quick, what the viewers have said, that the officers, I think they were in plain clothes, and people didn't even know they were cops. They just opened up the door, one of them said gun, and they start shooting. And then when the dust settled, police officials in Los Angeles stated there was no weapons in the vehicle.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Brother Ray Ray, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. How you doing, brother?
Okay, Brother Ray Ray, Community Cop family, how you doing?
All right,
Listen,
brother.
you
Thanks
should have
for
saw
calling.
the smile on Michael's face with Julian and Noel there. It's good to see y'all.
Yes, sir.
My
Yes, sir.
point number one is 103 Quincy Street this Wednesday. If you miss 100 years of lynching and the rise of white extremist groups, I bet you any amount of money that police officer out in Arizona was a member of an extremist group. Number two, on that Central Park 7 case, what all Alton did, the United African Movement still helped out the family of all of them. They should send Alton Maddox a check for what UAM did. They should send Alton Maddox a small check for all the stuff that they did. Number three, real quick, when you talk about Brother Willie Turks, that history that we had to go through, going out to Bensonhurst to go to school, going to Lafayette High School, FDR High School, New Utrecht High School.
That's right.
And
That's
they
right.
would not let us get out in those communities to go to school. But when it comes to Bedford-Stuyvesant, Bushwick, and all these places, we as black folks welcome these people, and they walking around here all comfortable. I really can't stand it because I had to fight all the time going to school.
Right.
And one last thing, they just signed, the legislators that's going to ask us to vote for Trump is just passed a law that an undocumented immigrant could get a driver's license, and you got 100 black men running around, their license is revoked, and they can't get a job to support their family. It's ridiculous. And political theater for the Central Park 5-7, political theater. The Boule is making big money off that documentary. and they wasn't there, and they should tell the story that there's a whole lot of other brothers in jail right now that cannot get out because they didn't do the crime that they was charged for. Thank you very much. Chanel Lewis is one of them, too.
Thank you, brother.
Well, let me just say to you, brother, that I understand your passion, your concern for Alton Maddox, and I think you should have let the audience know that it was United African Movement under the leadership of Alton Maddox that bailed out the victims in this case. So you didn't point that out, and you need to. And you also need to point out that all 4 black attorneys that was on this case were either disbarred. You know, Alton Maddox was disbarred. Colin Moore was disbarred. Robert Burns disbarred. Joe Mack suspended. 3 disbarments, 1 suspension, all for defending these black youth. So when you put it in that context, they're the ones that left with got scars on their body, not the attorneys who came in and got the checks, the $41 million, and then the $3 million after that. We're talking about the real attorneys that defended them way back when. Those are the ones that, they never got their just due.
Mm-hmm. And as it relates to a real issue that he brought up about New York State now stating that immigrants can receive licenses, that's, some people object to that. I personally object to that. I don't see how a government can issue government identification to people you determine to be in your country illegally. But be it as it may, there's a great push to defend immigrants, and, I have no problem with that. They ought to be defended. But when it comes to the rights of African Americans, even black elected officials are very quiet, very dormant, and very unaggressive. Here you have people in the country illegally receiving government, advantage or benefit, and that includes housing, because there was a push to deny New York City to deny illegal immigrants housing. They have, access to housing as well as other benefits. But when it comes to our rights and our benefits, not even our black selected officials can make sure aggressively that our rights and that we receive all the benefits that we deserve, et cetera, et cetera. So,
there is a broad, and I'm coming to our next caller. There is a broad disadvantages and unfairness and inequities that exist when you deal with black people. We were just talking about, these officers always being acquitted for killing unarmed black men. And as I sat here and I thought, there was just recently I believe he's a black officer who shot a white woman, and he was convicted.
Yes.
Rapidly.
Yes.
So there is duplicity when you start talking about the how Africans and people of color are treated and the injustice system that exists in this country. But I digress just shortly. Quickly. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
I'm calling from Brownsville, Brooklyn.
Go ahead, Brooklyn.
First of all, Trump didn't sign that law. That law was signed by Governor Cuomo for New York State giving illegals license.
Yes.
Right.
Second of all, Mike.
Yes.
Apology accepted.
Yes, sir. I apologized last week. Noel gave me the gas face, so I knew I was wrong. So he gave me that look, like fall back. So he gave me the look, and certainly when I thought about it later, I'm sorry, brother. And because Noel understood that the dynamics of watching something and the passion involved, and your feelings. So certainly I'm sorry.
No, but Mike, I understood your passion.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I understood your passion. I donated to the Central Park 7. I donated bail money.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Also met Yusuf after he came home from jail.
Right.
Okay. Also met you about 5 or 6 times, Mike.
Oh man. Okay. Next time you gotta let me know who you are, man.
Okay. All right. Now, Linda Fairstein. Her publisher dropped her.
Good.
And she had to step down from 4 or 5 boards that she sits on.
It's a lot of money.
So hopefully she will get hers.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your call.
Thank you for your call.
Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
He's calling from North Carolina.
Uh-oh. What's up, Paige?
Right.
Man, it's good to see all 3 of you in the house.
Yes, sir.
That's good.
Still missing one though.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Father.
Father
Absolutely.
Lucas.
Giving gentleman, shout out good morning.
Yes, sir.
I mean, these atrocities happen. You know, the names, the places, the names, but the atrocities and the crimes are still the same.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I'm getting tired of, same thing. We need to get up and look out for each other. We got to put race first. Now, that's number one. If we can put race first, then we can change a lot of this that's happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad where they don't what age, what condition, what the situation is. Women or children, they don't care. We have to get that we are at war. That's all I got to say.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you,
We
brother.
need to get
Yes,
right. So
sir.
y'all keep doing what y'all doing. Looking forward for you to have a 2-hour show. Y'all need more time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right,
Okay.
peace.
Peace,
All right,
brother.
peace,
Thank you for the
brother.
call. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment? Next caller, you on the air?
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, caller.
Call from Brooklyn.
Okay.
All I have to say is long live the hood. Long live the hood.
Yes, sir.
Long live. Okay. Long live the spirit of Cooks and others who on this day we have to remember, and certainly we have to remember Willie Turks and also Carlos Cooks. So we'll take that as their spirit. Yes, sir.
Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Yes, sir. Assalamu alaikum, Kareem from Harlem. It's good to see you brothers back again.
Yes, sir.
I have a small comment I'd just like to speak on. First of all, I'm going to go a different route. I like our people to really look at what's going on with this president and this Congress and the way they're allowing this cracker to get away with things that he's getting away with. If it was a problem with one of these allegations, they'd have had him hanging from the roof of the White House right now in front of everybody. Second of all, brothers, we got to look at how they're getting into all these skirmishes with Iran, with Venezuela, with North Korea, with China. And I got to say this to our people. You guys should be a damn fool to go 10,000 miles away fighting for the white man when the white man's killing your people right here in this damn country right here. If you want to fight your damn fight for your people here in this country. Stop going and fighting and dying for white folks, and they killing you at the same time. They still been killing you for 500 damn years. We need to wake the hell up.
Yes,
Assalamu
sir.
alaikum.
Thank you for your call,
Good
brother. We
song.
appreciate it.
But I want to say real quick, I'll take 30 seconds to say that Franklin D. Roosevelt warned America in his last speech to the country about the industrial military complex who he's seen.
Eisenhower, brother.
Eisenhower?
President Eisenhower said it.
I think it was Franklin D.
We'll
Roosevelt.
make your point, brother.
Right. I think it was Franklin D.
Make your point,
Roosevelt.
It wasn't, but go ahead.
Make your point.
I think it was.
Brother, make your
We'll
point,
look at
brother.
It was Ike. It was Ike.
Right?
It was
All right.
Ike.
Well, anyway, he warned the country during his last message to the country about the influence of the military-industrial complex. He said that he feared that he didn't deal with them a little more, and he felt that he should have. And that's what we're seeing with Trump. Trump is now engaged in a potential conflict with Iran. Now, we just came from Iraq. We're still in Afghanistan. He chittled one time in Venezuela, but now he's sending 1,000 troops to the Middle East. He already has warships over there. And then the language, from his administration is being elevated. So as the brother said, all they want to do is wave the flag and have these mothers and the fathers send their kids to a foreign shore to engage in another war. And I'm hoping it doesn't happen. Iran has never attacked America, is never threatened to attack America. But of course, America goes into these international ventures saying they're protecting American interests, which is really corporate interests. And it's really about making money for these military-industrial corporations. So, I'm just hoping it doesn't happen. But, America better be very careful, because if you listen to the language about Iran, these false flags, allegedly they attacked some cargo boats, some oil boats, it seems as if that's the direction that this country is going.
Well, what nation has attacked America yet?
Exactly. Exactly. No nation has ever attacked.
Exactly.
But yet this country has been, out of the 239 years, or when it was 239 years, we're a little older than now, we've been in war 222 of those 239 years. America is a war country. It has always been at war to a certain level. And unfortunately, the American people send their sons and daughters.
And we're involved in more wars than people know.
Exactly.
More
And
than
have
people
been.
know. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Eddie from the Bronx.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I read a strange article in The Final Call about a young black man named Abraham who went into this white church and killed 10 white people. And he was convicted. And then it was a strange incident that the white media had a blackout in Memphis when some black person was killed. And the black community in Memphis went berserk and attacked the police full force and beat the hell with reporter.
Yeah,
So I think if these situations continue, you might see the rise of some form of black terrorism coming from these young black men, because we ain't seen that yet. I'm out of here.
Okay, just I understand your point, but what happened was not terrorism. That was self-defense against a police department who was attacking the black community. Yes, it is true that about 25 police officers claimed injuries in that particular event you're talking about, that there was bricks and bottles thrown, but a community bereft of the protection of its own police departments, of the state apparatuses, governmental apparatuses, and that is under siege for that black man who was killed. It was a protest. So let's not respond to a protest. Let's not characterize it as terrorism. Terrorism is totally different. So I reject to the usage of that term when black people reserve the right to demonstrate, and then police won't allow them to demonstrate, and then ultimately it ends up in what was a real physical altercation.
Okay, next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Yes, hello. This is J&R Records from Brooklyn. How you brothers doing?
All right, how you doing today?
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. Go with your question.
Yes, I'm doing fine. Brother Mike, how you doing? I just want to say, man, I really appreciate you talking about Altamatics. And I heard him tell that story at the Slave Theater a few years ago. I really appreciate that. And you're doing a fine job.
Thank you, brother. Much respect.
All right.
All right.
Thank you for your call, brother. We greatly appreciate it. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment? Go ahead, caller.
Good afternoon. I'm calling from Manhattan.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a question. Why doesn't the mayor order the police commissioner to start releasing the police officer's history instead of waiting to go to Albany?
Well, I think there's something in the city charter or some legislation that won't allow them to immediately release it. I think they do have to go to have some legislation to force it to be released, if I'm correct.
No, well, you are correct, but the thing is, the thing that people are asking for is when there are serious allegations and things in their jacket, they can release it. They're allowed to do that. They are not to release addresses, social security number, and all that other things, personal things, with your family and all that. But in terms of your disciplinary record, that's what people are asking for. They're not trying to get intricate and really get intrusive. The basic things that people want to know, the mayor can release that, but he refuses to.
And the hypocrisy is that you see them always releasing information about
civilians.
The civilians. And even sometimes some information that was supposed to be secured about their juvenile record. So there's a contradiction. Right. And the overall goal is that they want to demonize the civilian and support the police officer irrespective of his horrific police record.
Well, the police department, and I always say this, they're in the business of protecting the police department. So if we think that they are solely going to serve the community and look for justice, we're sadly mistaken. But thank you for your call. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
From Harlem.
Okay, go ahead. Quick question or comment?
They're going to mess around and end up starting the Black Nation Army.
Okay. All right.
That was it?
All right. Thank you for your call. We're running out of time. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Hi, I'm Denise. I'm calling from Harlem.
Go ahead.
I just want to say real quick, I love you guys to death.
Love you,
and
Black.
I hope to meet y'all one day.
Love you, Black. Love you, Black.
Thank you. My son got to meet you one day when I think it was when Mike was running for mayor. I still have he got me one of those Freedom Party T-shirts.
Cool.
I still have it.
All right, good.
But listen, Cordell Clare, she used to be she's a district leader here in Harlem, and she was downtown yesterday. She was protesting Linda Fairstein.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to get all of her prior cases. That they want to investigate all of it. They want to recall all those cases.
Yes.
They want to investigate them to see that she must have done this before.
Mm-hmm.
And Cordell Clare used to work with Bill Perkins when he was when he was first a council person, and then he was the state senator.
Right.
Now she's the district leader. So there's some efforts now to get Linda Fairstein's prior cases. They want to investigate them. They want those cases opened.
Good.
And that should have happened years ago, as Michael said. To a lot of these black elected officials, it's an emotional response.
Mm-hmm.
Her history and videotape of these young men being coerced into making statements, being pressured and lied on. They should have seen this a long time ago. So if she was engaged, she's retired now. She's not even in the DA's office anymore. Mm-hmm. So her damage has been done, and she should have been scrutinized a long time ago. And trust you me, the Central Park case was not the first time that she engaged in this kind of practice.
All right, we got to wrap it up. We're running out of time. Noel?
All right, peace. All right, thank you, Community Cop family, for your nice words. And Lenny Lou, I love you. Little More, I love you. And when Peace called and said we need to be race first, as Malcolm said, they don't shoot black men, women, and children. They don't overly aggressively approach black families in cars with pregnant women and babies because you're Baptist, you're Methodist, you're Muslim, you're Church of God in Christ, you're Jehovah's Witness, you're Islamic, you're Muslim. They do it because you're black.